Hi, my name's Georgia. I'm definitely going to have a lot less graphs and results to present than Sander did, which was a great presentation and good to see so many preliminary results, Sander. I am definitely newer and just getting a little bit more started and kind of just starting getting working with some of the analysis during the postdoc. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that I've done in the past during my PhD and kind of give a lightning run through of my chapters for my PhD dissertation, and then talk a little bit about some of the projects that we're thinking about addressing with remotely sensed vegetation data. All right, so briefly, I'm going to talk really quickly about my background from my PhD dissertation. So I finished my PhD this past summer from University of Idaho, and then I moved down to Las Cruces to work at the Jornada in August, so still pretty new. So the first chapter of my PhD, or the first kind of main paper of it, was focusing on a herbicide treatment, or the herbicide indaziflam, for annual grass removal in southern Idaho, in kind of mountain, sagebrush, higher elevation plant communities at a university ranch. And so this was a field study that was about 80 acres in size, where we applied this herbicide to assess, did it effectively control annual grasses? And then separately, something we always think about with herbicide use is what was the impact on the non-target plant species, or the rest of the native plants in the system. And then finally, if there's ways we can maybe classify these communities and use some of the information to model fire behavior, to assess if indaziflam is able to effectively, alter fire behavior, because cheatgrass reduced or impacted fire behavior is a big concern, especially in the Great Basin. So briefly, we did find that indaziflam was effective at reducing annual grass cover. This study was definitely in an early invasion area for cheatgrass. And so it was able to effectively control cheatgrass, though it was limited because of high shrub and other cover that was kind of blocking the penetration of the herbicide to reach the surface level. And we observed really pretty high native plant community diversity, and overall was a pretty high resilience ecosystem to do this experiment within. So this is kind of an area where you would think about defending the core from further cheatgrass invasion, and kind of working in an early invasion setting. Okay, the next component of my dissertation was a laboratory combustion experiment, where we collected cheatgrass and 2 native perennial grasses in the field, and then we burned them in this little tube that I created in a laboratory combustion experiment. And so we were aiming to assess the flammability of cheatgrass and these 2 native perennial grasses that we tested. But we're also kind of wondering, cheatgrass induces these altered fire behaviors and fire regime shifts, especially in the Great Basin, but on an individual species level, is that holding true? Is it just because there's so much cheatgrass everywhere that it is altering these fire regimes? Or is it because cheatgrass as an individual, one plant, is very flammable? So we burned the perennial grasses with increasing amounts of cheatgrass, and then we did some analysis to consider if each species was sort of pulling its weight in the relationship of the combined flammability of those two. And we saw that, yes, cheatgrass is, pretty highly flammable. It burns, the seeds just can persist with fire. It's not good news. And we did observe, that cheatgrass can alter some of the perennial grasses' overall fire and flammability characteristics, and that often there's kind of some additive effect when cheatgrass and, Columbian needlegrass, which is one of the perennial grasses we tested, were burned together. There's some like extra bonus secret sauce that gets added between those 2 species that makes the combined mixture even more flammable than we would expect. And so definitely important to consider individual species characteristics when thinking about landscape scale flammability. And then finally, in my dissertation, we did another experiment to assess some techniques to measure shrub canopy volume using drone-derived images that we constructed a point cloud with. So we examined for 8 different shrub species that are present in southern Idaho, and we examined a few different methods that you could use to measure the point cloud volume, to kind of find some good tools that we could use moving forward, and if we wanted to apply these same methods for more of a landscape scale assessment of fuel loading or shrub biomass or some other metrics like that. Okay, that was my PhD. It was great. Now I'm here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the projects I'll be working on here and what we're kind of planning on working on. Like I said, we're just getting started. So one of the main data sets that I'll be working with is the rangeland analysis platform. And I know some of you know and love it, but I'll give a little bit of a background. So the rangeland analysis platform is a kind of data set that's available for all US rangelands that was built based on combining Landsat satellite imagery and data from field monitoring points collected from AIM and NRI programs and other similar programs. And the satellite imagery and the monitoring points were combined through a neural network, and the output are these cover and production layers that are available to us. And RAP has kind of been widely adopted to be used for kind of an assessment for how an area is doing and kind of tracking a site and kind of just a tool that's available to us. So I'll be using specifically mostly the vegetation cover data set, which is available within these 5 plant and functional groups that are listed for annual percent cover from 1986, the start of Landsat, until current times. And some of the questions that we're hoping to address using RAP data combined with other data sets are first, RAP is being widely used and at least thought of or discussed maybe, but there are still a lot of questions about how RAP estimates of cover compare to, or estimates of production as well, compared to, on the ground monitoring data. Like how good is it actually doing, especially in at the Jornada or at, certain areas. And so we'll be doing analysis based on that. And then we'll also be using some RAP data to do sort of a back in time view of predicting ecological state change. So to do our assessments, kind of an accuracy check for the RAP data, we'll be taking the vegetation cover layer, and then we'll be taking AIM and NRI field monitored cover from the past 2 years, because the 2021 and 2022 data is not within the RAP model. It was all the data up to 2020 was used, and 2021 and 2022 have not been put into the model. So it's kind of an independent sample for us to use. So we'll be comparing, how close do field monitored cover compare to RAP estimated cover, and we'll be asking questions about how maybe does that vary by scale at which we're looking at the RAP, and does that also vary by ecoregion? So maybe the RAP is really good at assessing annual grass cover in the Great Basin, but maybe it's not as great at assessing that down here, or some other metrics. And then for understanding how RAP data may be able to be used to predict ecological state change, we're planning on calculating spatial covariance between the different plant functional groups per year. And that's kind of a measure of spatial compatibility of those functional groups. So for example, the covariance between perennial forbs and grasses and annual forbs and grasses, if it's really high and positive, it means that those two are likely to occur in the same spot. Like they're friends, they like to hang out in the same areas. And so we'll be looking at tracking if there's any changes in the covariance, and that's been used to classify and do some diagnoses for ecological transitions. And so we'll be looking at this at the Jornada and trying to view through the lens of ecological sites to see if we can go back in time to predict when there are changes, and we'll be verifying this with field data. So that's my lightning run through of kind of what I've done in the past and what we're thinking about doing here. And I'm really excited to be here and hear from everyone else. So thanks.